those are the people I truly serve. The root of all our evil, it begins with the Federal Reserve. Hey, yeah, well, let's go back in time when everybody was so proud of a man.
I'm Tommy Salmons. This is Year Zero. Today, I have Cotton, otherwise known as Cotton Archist on Twitter, from the Slurp Gang podcast. Cotton joined me to discuss Capitalist Realism by Mark Fisher. This was a really intriguing conversation. I had never heard of Mark Fisher before Cotton brought him to my attention. So I was excited to kind of dig in to these ideas. But first, as always, RyanBunting.com for all of your graphic design needs. Go to RyanBunting.com. Ryan Bunting is a great anarcho-capitalist and a great libertarian. So, go to RyanBunting.com for all of your graphic design needs. He designed my podcast logo and Pete Quinones' podcast logo. As always, thank you, Tom Burton, for the music. I am here with Cotton Archist. What's going on, man?
Hey, man, how's it going?
It's going. Just another day in the truck.
I got you.
So, we decided to get together and record an episode about something I know very, very, very little about, which is kind of cool because I'm going to be learning as the audience is learning. But is this your first like serious interview or podcast that you've ever done?
No, I've done at least one other where I did 2 hours on Nietzsche.
Okay.
So I think I might have done another one on Nietzsche too, but I can't remember.
Gotcha. Okay, I just wanted to make sure. I'd never heard you do a serious podcast, and when we were talking about this, I was like, God damn, this kid's gonna make me look stupid. So, but we wanted to talk about Mark Fisher,
yeah,
and Capitalist Realism, which I listened to that audiobook 1.5 times. I'm halfway through it the second time. I didn't quite make it through it twice today. But that's because I got distracted with another friend of mine's podcast, but that's another story.
Yeah.
So, the first thing I noticed whenever I was listening to this, the first thing that popped in my head is Ted Kaczynski. I mean, that was the first thing that popped into my head, especially the section of where he's talking about culture and how culture's been like ripped away from the people, and like you're not able to, if you're just conserving the culture, you're actually not moving forward at all with culture. And so that was something that really grabbed me in this. And the second thing that I really thought was interesting was the amount of references to pop culture that Mark Fisher used, and how he used it as a reflection of the death of capitalism or late term capitalism, however you want to look at it. So I really thought that was really interesting, just the way he was breaking it down.
Yeah. So, like, Mark Fisher, he was a philosophy professor, and he had a PhD in philosophy, but he got started writing for, like, NME, isn't that the music publication, and, like, Pitchfork and stuff like that, and he was writing about music, and he was kind of a music journalist, and he would, like, back in the mid-2000s and early 2000s, when, like, blogging really took off, that's when, like, Curtis Yarvin had his unqualified what's it called? Man, I'm blanking on the names today. I can't even
remember what it was called.
Yeah, well, it was Curtis Yarvin's blog, and Nick Land had a blog. I don't remember the name of it either. And then Mark Fisher had a blog called K-Punk. That's, like all these blogs from like the early to late and then kind of ending in around 2010. There was a big blog sphere, and Mark Fisher got into that by writing about music. And so that's kind of a lot of the examples that he uses, draws on music and the various different kind of epochs of music. And then, he also wrote about, that's the thing about a lot of these lefty authors, is they pay a lot of attention to the feeling of different things. So art, that's their main draw for examples. And that's one of my issues with the book, is he kind of, he doesn't really define capitalism other than like the feeling of what he thinks capitalism is. It's not, a delineated system, but yeah, I know a big example he uses in the book for kind of the end of history is Kurt Cobain. And he was like, Kurt Cobain realized what he was, and that was kind of a pawn for MTV. And that's why he ended up killing himself. And we can get into the conspiracy that he didn't kill himself or whatever, but do you know about that? Courtney Love.
Yeah, my wife's a huge Nirvana fan. That's her favorite band of all time, and I refuse to get into that on this podcast.
I got you. But he realized that he was going to be like another Jim Morrison or something like that, right. And that led to some depression. And Mark Fisher had pretty much the exact same thing happen to him, because he committed suicide in 2017. So I know a lot of people say he was like one of the last victims of like late stage capitalism. But yeah, he talks a lot about this concept of hauntology, which I don't think he uses the term once in Capitalist Realism, but he's written about it elsewhere, where it is how there's been no new media like post 2000. And maybe you could even extend that to 9/11. Like maybe that was the catalyst. But, right. After the grunge era, everything has been like pop punk or, rap or pop rap or rap rock or whatever. But, there's no new thing. No one is inventing rock like they invented it, or no one's inventing rap like they invented it. Like it's all kind of mashups of these things that are already existing. And there's this sense that that people feel that they can't create anything new. And he first wrote about that in music, and then eventually with the book Capitalist Realism, he went on to say that people have the exact same feeling when it comes to capitalism or like corporate, neoliberalism or whatever. Like the best you can do is work within the framework of neoliberalism and capitalism as he defines it. And I have issues with how he defines it, but
right.
But
it felt like he was using Marx Engels' definition of capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of got the idea that he kind of straddled postmodernism and Marxism. Like he wasn't really sure what side of the fence to be on there.
Yeah. Well, like he's definitely if he's not an outright Marxist, he's kind of on the outskirts of Marxism, and then he's also a student of Deleuze.
Yeah.
And Deleuze, that's probably my biggest issue with Deleuze is, again, he writes about the feelings of things. So whenever he writes about capital, like this thing that we call capital, he always talks about like the feeling of it, and he makes it sound like the super ominous thing. Like I can't remember the exact wording, but there's a famous quote from Deleuze that like capital is this, unnameable, unmanageable, ethereal concept that invades everything and is like serpent-like and spreads out and whatever, and invade, like it's all heavy with negative connotations and is very it just kind of infects whatever it comes into contact with. And but and that's a problem I have with the book, but I do think his main diagnosis is right. Like when he says capitalist realism, I think of like our current mode of basically fascism, you know, and like how here's a good example. He talks about the Live 8 concert and how I forget the main aim of the concert, but I think it was like to get rid of world hunger, or like in some incredibly, you know, lofty goal like that.
Yeah, I remember.
That's clear.
I remember that. Yeah, that was the U2 Bono
Right.
holding that shit. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and so what they were trying to do is like raise money to lobby governments to give resources to poor countries.
Mm-hmm.
And Mark Fisher's issue with that was what they were trying to do was work within the system that kept resources or took resources from these poor countries, you know.
Right.
And I mean, he obviously took issue with that, as I do.
There was a story from that time frame during that concert. Some small organization had tried to get in contact with Bono to get permission to set up a table to raise funds for something. Greenpeace or whatever. I don't even know what it was. And Bono never responded. He wouldn't respond to him. And so they just showed up to the concert and set a table up outside the concert, and Bono had him kicked off the property.
Yeah.
Like, it was all about his reputation, about him building his brand. It had nothing to do with actually, So I thought the way he described Bono's Live Aid concert, I think he did a great job on that.
Yeah, and you know, like another good example, I don't remember what it was called, but there was a big concert like that where they were trying to raise money to, you know, fight global warming, and the amount of power they used during the concert and the amount of private jets flying to and from the concert, you know, I mean, it was incredible.
Yeah.
The amount of emissions they put out into the atmosphere.
Was this that John Kerry concert that just happened earlier last year? Like,
no, this was
a joke. That was a joke.
Oh,
you can laugh. You're allowed to laugh.
I don't know, man. I'm too young. I know
who
John Kerry
is.
I know who John Kerry is. But man, I don't if he's got some hot beats, I'm not aware of him, dude. Does he shred on the guitar?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Is it John Kerry and Jeb Bush?
Oh, hell yeah.
Dynamic duo.
No, if they had a band, it'd definitely be like screamo death metal, man.
You think? I'd like to see it. I'd like to see them do some rock rap. You know,
rap. Okay.
Yeah, I want to hear them cover "Pretty Fly for a White Guy" by Offspring.
Yeah. Either it's like super heavy and kind of violent like that, or they're doing like Irish folk music or something, you know. And then like Jeb Bush is up there. Yeah, Jeb Bush is up there doing a jig, you know, on stage.
Yeah. Jeb Bush is Corplicani.
But yeah, so like
okay,
go ahead.
So one of the things he talks a lot about in the book, and I kind of want to clear up because there's and we're going to get more serious and more in depth here, I promise. We're just kind of warming into it,
yeah.
Entertaining you bastards before we bore y'all to death. So one of the things that he fails to define, which nobody seems to define well, and you in your notes you defined it pretty well. So I want to go ahead and give you an opportunity to define neoliberalism, because I think that's quite a misunderstood term. A lot of times it's misused, and he was using it, and I was kind of like, okay, what are you trying to say with this term? Is it everybody that doesn't agree with you? Like, where are we going with this, you know?
Right. Well, neoliberalism, you know, the easiest way to do that is to like juxtapose it from neoconservatism, you know, and I had a conversation with I don't know how he pronounces his last name. I'm from Louisiana, so I'm going to pronounce it the correct way, but I had a conversation with Marcel Dumont from the Mises Institute. Or he has a fellowship, or not a fellowship, but he's a student there. And we ironed out that neoliberalism and neoconservatism are basically of the same stripe. And but the difference is that neoconservatives are hawkish on war, while the neoliberals are hawkish on like economic reform and, you know, stimulus into the economy and supply side economics. But, you know, I mean, the easiest way to do it is like think of the perfect example of a neoliberal is Obama. You know, he's not very liberal at all. He's not really even on the left, you know, but I mean, he's like the funniest meme that really describes this is, you know, there's like the political compass, 4 quadrants. And, you know, there's Trump, who is in the top right and a little bit more on the right. And then, you know, there's a tiny jump to the left with Biden. And everyone's like, oh no, you know, we're in a liberal hellhole. And, but I think that the best way to describe it is basically a uniquely democratic melding of government and business. And by that I don't mean like, you know, your mom and pop shop around the corner. I mean, you know, Amazon and whatever. That's not a business. I mean, Amazon hadn't turned a profit in forever. Same thing with Tesla. I mean, they're not profitable, but they're making a shit ton of money from government handouts and whatever. But I guess that's the best way to describe it. That a lot of different people have different definitions. You know, in the outline I sent you, part of the reason why I'm citing so many lefty people, and I still have more I'm going to do that I haven't written down yet, is because I think that like the best way to describe neoconservatives is by looking at people on the right. Like one of the best people to write about neoconservatism is Rothbard, because he was on the right. And my theory is that because they occupy similar areas of the Overton window. So looking at neoliberalism, which is somewhat on the left, certainly as compared to neoconservatism, you got to look at lefty people. And when, like in Mark Fisher's writing, he kind of uses capitalism, corporatism, neoliberalism interchangeably. And at this point, I don't really have a problem with that. Like, it kind of sucks because Mises, you know, and Rothbard, when they wrote capitalism, they basically meant like laissez-faire, you know, economics. But when these other people that have a lot more sway in the public consciousness write about capitalism, they basically mean corporatism and state-sponsored businesses.
Right.
And I don't have a problem with that. And that's.
I was just gonna mention I did my first solo podcast I ever did. It was only like 19 minutes long, and it was based off of a conversation that Parabyland had with Pete Quinones. And I know I fucked up Pear's name, and I apologize. I never know how to say that right. But my whole point was, is it even worth trying to resuscitate the term capitalism? Because at this point it has such a bad, you know, it's kind of like this meme now of the corporatist structure, and it's become exactly what Marx and Engels were defining it as, at least in the public sentiment for the most part. Unless you're a conservative, they're the only people that hold on to that term in any way that, you know, Hayek or Friedman or any of them guys would have looked at it. But for the most part, in throughout the public, it's looked at it as a pejorative and negative connotations. And so I would that's whenever I kind of abandoned the term capitalism. But as you were, I'm sorry.
Right. Well, you know, back to defining neoliberalism, it's interesting. Neoliberalism, the term, was coined by the theorists at the Mont Pelerin Society, which included Friedrich Hayek, Milton Friedman, and Ludwig von Mises. Oh. And there's a famous, I forget what exactly they were talking about. They were like maybe talking about the the best way and the freest way to implement some sort of price controls of some description. And Mises walked out of the meeting and called all of them socialists. But I mean, Mises is like, you look up like the origins of neoliberalism, and that's one of the only instances like where you go to a major publication and they will write about Mises.
Right.
And basically what I think they were trying to do at the Pellerin Society was, because I mean they were all minarchists, like even Mises was a minarchist, and what they were trying to do is find the most beneficial way to have the least possible amount of government and allow business to flourish. And as anarchists, we know that's not possible, really. But what it did do is kind of like with the founding of America, was having a government there really allowed for the market to be incredibly efficient and for the government to most efficiently leech off of the business's efficiency. So I think that is part of why the neoliberal system has proved to be the most successful, as far as, compared to mercantilism or feudalism or whatever, as far as just people having things. I mean, we have so much shit, our phones and computers and all the beer we want and whatever, we just have so much stuff. And I think that as compared to anything before, we have increased the quality of life so exponentially that it seems like there's no like, until someone thinks of the next thing. And I mean, we have plenty of theorists in our community that are really good at that, but they don't have public sway. But in the public consciousness, they feel like, well, we're not going back to mercantilism, we're not going back to feudalism, so that there's no alternative. And that's Fisher's main thesis as far as like his description of the current moment. And I think that that's something that we should really tackle. I think that like it's really good to iron out the specifics of stuff, but also I think it is good to point out, and Hoppe is probably the main guy as far as this goes, to point out, like, we don't even know what we're going to do. Like, we can talk about that later, but what we're doing right now is not sustainable. So, like, we have to get into the mindset that what we're doing right now is going to come to an end. Right. And that's a good thing. And we have to be excited about that, and we have to like, it's the last paragraph in Capitalist Realism where he says that it's in moments when you feel like you can't do anything when you actually can do everything. So that's a little white pill that he drops at the end of the book. And yeah, so I don't know if I answered your question about defining neoliberalism, but
well, no, I think you did a good job. I think the way I look at, because you're equivocating is not the right word, but I'm just going to use it just because that's the word that popped in my head. Neoconservatism and neoliberalism, and the way I look at it, not necessarily the correct way, and it's just the way I look at it, it is an extension of progressivism, both of them.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So you got the right wing progressivism, you got the left wing progressivism, so to speak. But compared to actual right wing policy or actual left wing, ideology, they're centrists, right? So and they're centrists in the way that they're trying to maintain status quo, sufficiency. So it's the same reason that Trump was an outcast, but Jeb Bush would have been perfectly acceptable. Right?
Yeah.
These, like your Brian Stelters and your Don Lemons, they would have given Jeb Bush a hard time, but you notice as soon as Trump won, they started praising H.W. Bush, because they were part of the royalty, the progressivism. And Burnham, the guy who wrote The Machiavellians, he also wrote a book called Suicide of the West.
Mm-hmm.
And he breaks down liberalism. I mean, it is just intense. If you've never read it, I would read it, because he just goes to town on liberalism. And what he's doing is basically he's lumping in, he's really dissecting neoliberalism and neoconservatism, the progressivism in the United States. But I mean, he is just hatcheting these guys, right? And just spends like 300 pages just digging deep into what it is. And that's really what we're seeing, and that's what we're dealing with. And so the way they're able to create factions between left libertarian and right libertarian, it's like, yeah, whatever, man, that argument doesn't even mean anything, because as Fisher's pointing out, like, these people are progressively moving forward with their agenda. And it's the reason that, Coca-Cola picks up wokeism, like they're going to utilize your strategies and implement your languages against you. And I think he did a really good job of dissecting that.
Yeah. I mean, he talks about how, one example of that he talks about in the book is the movie Wall-E, the Disney movie.
Yep.
He said,
which I was so shocked that he was referencing a children's film.
Yeah.
I was like, what?
Yeah. So, like, his main argument is that the movie was making fun of not only the people that were watching it, but also the people that made the movie. And he didn't mean that in kind of an insightful way, that they made this, this movie that really tapped into the collective consciousness, and it's this, greater work than it actually is. Right. But what he meant was they were implementing the societal issues that they were shedding a light on in the movie. They were implementing those things to make the movie. And, all these people watching the movie, stuffing their face with candy and popcorn and sugary soda and whatever, are watching this movie, and they're like, yeah, we're not going to be like them. We got to whatever. And it gives these people like this sense of like, oh, I'm better than, my enemies. I'm a green person and I believe in climate change. I'm better than the people that don't, and it gives them a sense of satisfaction without actually doing anything, and the same exact thing, like it's the Pepsi commercial, man, with the Kardashian chick in it, where she walks up to the line of cops and hands them a Pepsi, and then suddenly all's right in the world,
Right.
And like people watch that commercial and they're like, damn, if I buy Pepsi, then we're gonna fix police brutality. Like, that's it,
Right.
and
Yeah.
it's just kind of it can't last, because it's ridiculous. Like,
cigarettes
Lockheed
are torches of freedom.
Right. Well, like, man, you're from Louisiana. I'm from Louisiana.
Mm-hmm.
Every single time I drive into Baton Rouge, I'm on I-10. I drive into Baton Rouge. I see a big billboard for Dow Chemical about how they appreciate their black and LGBTQ plus employees. Every single time I drive in, and I mean, every single time I see it, I'm like, this is incredible. Like, I can't be the only one that sees this, and I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, but I mean, that's kind of what he's talking about, and this, I don't know. I think once he wrote the book, he was done with the concept. I think he felt like he explored it all that he could. But I really, he committed suicide in 2017. I really wish, or maybe not, but maybe that's why he committed suicide. But that there's all this stuff about how Occupy Wall Street was actually, I mean, like they made somewhat of a misdiagnosis of exactly where the problem was. Like, yeah, the problem was on Wall Street, but it was also in Washington. Even more so in Washington. But it was on Wall Street, so fine.
Right.
So, like, I mean, Occupy Wall Street was a good thing to me, and And you know that Peter Schiff talks about that in his famous. I linked it on this outline. You know, where Peter Schiff went to Occupy and was like, "Y'all aren't wrong, but you're not totally right." And then I know that there are a lot of memes about this, but it's interesting how immediately after Occupy Wall Street, all these finance companies and mega global corporations started to feed these things into the left. The wokeism and whatever. And so now it's like if you see a commercial about, like a Coca-Cola commercial about, some weird stuff, like, a drag queen is reading, a book to some kids in a library, and then, the climax of the commercial is she takes a sip of Coca-Cola.
Right.
And that's a commercial. And if you see that and you're like, you're kidding me, right? I mean, this is obviously just pure propaganda. If you say that, you're a Nazi, Yeah. And that's the good people on the left, like Mark Fisher, that see that and they're like, no, this is bullshit.
Yeah.
They're like, no, we're not gonna. Like, no, I may be on the left, but I don't give a shit about Hillary Clinton. I'm not going to vote for Hillary Clinton. Like, those are the good people on the left, and I think that's what Pete has really tapped into with his diagonal unity stuff recently.
I actually think that was Aaron's idea, but yeah.
Right. Well, yeah, definitely. The blame goes to both of them.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'm not even sure they're two different people, honestly, at this point. I've never seen them in the room at the same time. So
that's true.
Yeah. So
that's very true.
But yeah, and that's one thing I've gotten into, and I'm excited because next week I'm actually having a conversation with Michael Rechtenwald, and so I plan on getting into some of this with him. But I started just calling them the corporate left. Like, I mean, I wasn't even playing with these people. I was just like, you're just part of the corporate left. And Aaron called them Fortune 500 socialist or Marxist.
Yeah.
That's what it was. Fortune 500 Marxist, which was fucking awesome.
Yeah.
And so it's like, you people aren't serious about your ideology. Either you're not serious about your ideology or you don't understand your ideology. Something's going on here. There's a disconnect. You're completely missing the point. Now, I did hear Michael Rechtenwald say when he was on Tom Wood's show that if when he was a Marxist, if he would have seen what's going on now with the corporations and the Great Reset, the shaping the future of the fourth industrial revolution, all these things that are happening right now in society, he would have actually been on the side of the corporations, right? And I think the logic he was getting at was because if you destroy all the mom and pops, all the small businesses, it kind of goes back to this whole Trotsky quote where Trotsky had said something along the lines that if you offer us a government program, we're going to accept it, but the end goal is always the revolution, period. Yeah. It's always the revolution. So we'll accept whatever olive branch you extend to us, but we're still moving forward with the revolution. It doesn't matter what you do. And so it kind of struck me as what Rechtenwald was saying. The Marxists are adopting the corporate like structure, the corporations like kowtowing to them basically, because they're not going to, they see the destruction of the mom and pops. So what's that going to do? That's going to radicalize regular, everyday, blue-collar workers and push more people into their camp to overthrow the corporations. So it seems like Mark Fisher would have completely rejected that idea. Just outright said, no, that's not the way to do it. And I think what he gets at, and I think it's the way I look at it, is that he understands the power of money and how much power these corporations actually hold over government, not through government, but over governments in a lot of cases, And so I'm just curious, how do you, is that a position that these people will ever square that circle, the different strategies?
I'm not sure, you know, because like I don't know much about Rechtenwald's background, but I know Mark Fisher was firmly on the left, and he was on the left of like he was on the left to the point where I don't even think he would be pro Antifa, because like it's either you're on like the extreme right left where, you know, you're a Hillary Clinton voter and you live in a gated community and you hate Antifa. You don't say it, but you hate them. Or you're, you know, some poor, you know, 20-year-old that lives in New York City and you love Antifa and you may even go out with them. But I'm not sure if Mark Fisher would even be on that point. Like, as far as like a lefty person goes that doesn't know much about economics like we do, I think that I think he's probably one of the more principled people on the left. So I think that he was so ideologically pure, might be the right way to put it, that like just the thought of accepting an olive branch from the corporations just disgusted him. And then, you know, he also, and this is something that I think I put in the outline. He definitely talks, yeah, I did. He definitely talks about it in the book, is, you know, he was a professor. So he wrote about like the audit system that the, let me see here. Yeah, it was the Office for Standards in Education in the UK, because he was British. And what they did was they had this system where they would like send a ton of investigators into each classroom to give an evaluation to all the professors, and everyone hated it. Everyone all the professors hated it. All the university administrators hated it because it was so intrusive and just so kind of draconian. So what the department did was they said, all right, okay, we're going to give you more freedom. And so they instituted a new system of like self-regulation where each professor would give themselves a grade, and there was minimal evaluators that would actually go into the colleges, and they would instead mostly evaluate the university system of self-evaluation. And that, I mean, it was under the guise of the professors having more freedom, but it just was even more draconian. So I think Fisher was a bit skeptical of olive branches because, you know, in the societies of control, that kind of it always tends to bite people back, you know. And because you think about a transaction, right? It's each party in the transaction thinks that they're getting the better deal, you know. So like if the government gives you a transaction like, hey, we're going to give you this service or this program, or, you know, Coca-Cola wants to donate to your political fund, they have a hell of a lot more power than you do, and they're the ones thinking they're getting the better deal. So, I mean, it's insidious, and I think that's why he would not be willing to accept those olive branches, because he always knew that they have a lot more inside knowledge of the system than he did, and it's safer to assume that they knew how to come out on top no matter what olive branch they extended, you know, in any manner. So
yeah, well, and we saw that this year. I mean, you know, you had during the election, you had Kamala Harris sharing the GoFundMe to get bail for Antifa and BLM members that have been arrested, right? And then as soon as Joe Biden was elected, BLM's like, hey, wait, they're not even talking to us anymore. They won't say anything to us anymore. And Joe Biden basically comes out and says, yeah, we have no intent on you know, talking to BLM. Like we never intended on doing that. So you kind of see how that game is played, and maybe Fisher had better insight on that and understood that a little bit better than some of these lefties nowadays do. Maybe they think if they're willing to pay lip service, well, if we can get them to pay lip service to hurt their own brand, then we can maneuver them in another way. But then you've seen some of these brands that started, started losing money, started feeling the pain, say, okay, we're going to distance ourselves. I mean, Coca-Cola's an instance of that. They fired the attorney that was responsible for that whole woke, you're going to go through this whatever woke training or whatever they call it. And they fired that guy, hired another lady, and she was like, yeah, we're not doing that anymore. It's not going to happen. Yeah. So I think Fisher might have had a better handle on that, than some of these guys nowadays do. And
well, another thing is, if I would bet that if the LP during 2016 had a stronger candidate, I bet they would have let them on the debate stage, because then all that would have done, like, hey, they gave a great performance, and that would have just taken votes away from Trump. And if that were to happen, I'm pretty convinced Hillary Clinton would have won. We'd have a Bill Clinton situation again. But it would be seen as like, hey, they're giving us a fair chance, and whatever. So and then the other thing is, if Trump was not the nominee and it was Jeb Bush who they wanted, it wouldn't have happened. So I think that, like, it's literally 3D chess, or 4D chess, whichever the one that Trump plays. Like it's
I always said all chess is 4D. You got the 3 dimensions of the board and the 1 dimension of time, so it's all 4D. But anyway,
well, 5D.
You know what? I'm going to disagree with you just a little bit there, because I don't think they would have they didn't put Gary Johnson on the stage against Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. I don't think they would have given them a shot. And I think it's because they realize that libertarians pull from the Democrat pool just as much as they pull from the Republican pool as well. And so I don't think so. I don't think the libertarians stand a chance to get on the debate stage. I just don't. Yeah. Especially if you have a strong libertarian candidate. Now, if they could put somebody up there to make a fool out of, like somebody that wears a boot on their head or something.
Right.
Just kidding.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. But yeah, no. The only reason they would want to put a third party on stage is to make a third party look irrelevant.
Yeah. Well, I think if what was it Ross Perot that ran with George Bush Sr. and Bill Clinton?
Yeah, it was Ross Perot, and that's why they won't put a serious candidate on stage. Yeah,
but I think that it has to be in their thought process when they were thinking about that hey, he's right wing, so like if he's going to take votes from anyone, it's going to be from the guy, like the dude that's not our guy. It's going to be Bush. So and I think that when it comes to anything media, the left, even if that's like the corporate left, like the Hillary Clinton people, they have their hands in that much more. So, like if Trump was the really strong candidate and Hillary Clinton just could not compete, right? And then there was someone that was really strong, like, I mean, if like Hornberger was the candidate or the nominee last election, I think there'd be much more of a chance, because he would just take votes away from Trump, most likely, because the people. Because, like the people that voted for, and Fisher talks about this in the book a bit, like what Biden stood for. He didn't talk about Biden specifically, but like the Biden archetype, like the Obama archetype and the Clinton archetype, they represent modernism that most people of older generations are used to. And Trump was a very postmodern president. Like, he didn't have any set definitions. He constantly was like, no, I never said that, when he obviously did. And we all find that funny because, like, we know the moment we're in, Yeah. But Biden did not represent that. He represented these things like normalcy and decorum and presidentialness,
Yeah.
So I don't know. We don't have to get hung up on the debate stuff, but
That's fine.
But my main thing is to say that, like, beware of, like, concessions, you know, because more often than not they come back and bite you.
Yeah, you're probably not getting the value that you think you're going to get out of it.
Right.
You know, all right, so like the most interesting part of the book for me was him talking about I don't even know how to present this properly, because I was trying to grasp what he was saying, which is why I was listening to it again. But he calls dyslexia postlexia.
Right.
And so he's talking about the mental illness that's associated with late stage capitalism. Now, what I thought was interesting in chatting with you about this was you grew up in a different generation than I did, right? So I grew up in the 90s. You know, it was kind of, everything was apolitical. We kind of just didn't give a shit. Whereas you a lot of your life was after 9/11. Like your teenage years, like your whole development really was after 9/11. So what is it about the younger generation? What are we missing from Gen X? What are we missing about the Gen Z that y'all are doing differently, but brings us together as, you know, these natural allies? We kind of think the same about a lot of the things, but y'all kind of have, number one, y'all are much more political a lot earlier than we were. Eric and I talked about this a little bit on the podcast I did with him. Y'all are much more political earlier, and y'all seem to be more aware of what's going on around you than we did. Was this something that you felt was necessary?
No, I don't. Well, maybe. Like, I think the reasoning behind it is that, because, like, for me, 9/11 is one of my earliest memories. Like, I was almost 4 years old when 9/11 happened. And it happened when I was, like, homesick from school, and my dad stayed home with me, so it was kind of a weird circumstance, and I think that's the only reason I remembered it. Like, if it had happened while I was at school, I don't think I would have. But you know, another thing is, I don't remember a time when we didn't have a computer in the house, you know. So I think it's that it all goes back to dopamine. Like, my generation has just been constantly just inundated with games and the internet, and then especially social media. Because, like, you know, when social media hit, you know, as far as Facebook and Twitter and stuff, I was in middle school, so we were just able to get access to that stuff and really engage in it, and we all did to an incredible extent. You know, some of us are still doing it on, you know, Twitter. But, you know, like, Fisher says an interesting thing. You know, he calls depression, he uses the term depressive hedonia, where he says that depression is typically in the literature, and I used to be a psychology student, and I can vouch for this. He said depression is typically described as a state of anhedonia, meaning like an inability to search for pleasure. You know, just you're lethargic and whatever. But, you know, Fisher noticed that kids don't have an issue with searching for pleasure. You know, that's why they, you know, drink constantly and you know, scroll all day and just are constantly searching for that next hit of dopamine. The problem is they can't find the pleasure. They're looking for it, but they can't find it. And I think the difference between our generations is that generations prior to, like, the internet being this massive thing that, you know, you're using all day, every day, people, their brains are just wired different. Like, and it's the dopamine thing, you know, it's those neural pathways that are just reinforced every single time you get that like on Twitter that, you know, during my formative years I had. So those pathways are super strong, but for people older than me, they didn't have that. So I mean, the brain is just kind of fundamentally different. And then the other thing is, everything after, I mean, it was getting pretty bad before, but, 9/11 really solidified just the politicization of everything. After 9/11, and I mean, it really started with, Desert Storm, but which gas station you went to became a political choice based off of, which Saudi family, or whatever, or different, country owned that gas station. So, I grew up with that everywhere. We wouldn't go to whatever gas station because there was the owner was very anti-American. So I had that in my household, where I didn't really have that pre 9/11 you just do your thing and whatever, you don't care. I didn't have that, and I guess and it sucks because I don't think that life should be that political.
Yes.
You can't see a children's movie without being inundated with political themes and whatever, and that's bullshit,
Right.
man. Just I mean,
Right.
try if a children's movie is going to be anything, it should be moral, But I mean, teach kids not to lie. Don't teach kids that guns are bad or whatever,
Right.
But I guess that it needed to happen just because you can't engage in the world these days without being political. I
Right.
mean, even when I was a kid, the thought of, someone walking up to my dad and asking him who he voted for, everyone would be like, well, that's none of your business. Everyone around would be like, what the fuck are you talking about? But now, someone asks you who you voted for, that would not surprise me at all. Or if you got the
It's
vaccine.
just normal everyday, conversation. That's just small talk nowadays.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or
Yeah.
if you got the vaccine, that's none of your business,
Right.
I mean that's insane, but you have to engage in that to a certain extent. If someone asks you if you got the vaccine, either you're gonna say yes, even if you didn't, because you're just get away from me, or you're gonna say no, and they're gonna jump on you. So you have to engage in that a bit,
Right.
just to interact with people. But then the other thing is, I think people of my generation, either they're the people that really enjoy it, and you should be wary of them, because that's the next generation's Obama, that's the next generation's
Right.
Mitch McConnell or whatever, and beware of those
Right.
people.
Yeah.
But then I honestly think, and this goes back to Fisher talking about depression, I think people of my generation are just so tired. I know that I've talked to my dad about this. The stuff that I have read that I felt like I needed to, and the debates I've gotten into because I felt like I needed to, he wouldn't have thought of until after 30.
Yeah.
And I'm 23. So and I every person I talk to that's around my age that isn't just a complete burnout, which you can't blame them. That's an easy thing to be these days. It's just so tiresome.
Jesus,
Every- I
Cotton,
mean-
you're my son's age.
Yeah.
My oldest son is 22.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
But
you're right there.
yeah.
And he could just not give a fuck about anything political. He's like, I don't give a fuck about y'all's bullshit. Just leave me
Hey,
alone.
you know, that's-
He's like, I'm a libertarian by default. Leave me alone. he
Hey,
takes
that's
after
good,
me
man.
in that way.
That's good, man.
Yeah.
Save a lot of headaches. With that.
I was talking to my 16-year-old. We were chatting earlier about economics in one lesson. So there's that. Because my 16-year-old and my 17-year-old texted me a while back and was like, Dad, what book should we read? And so I was talking to him about books, and I bought them each a copy of Economics in One Lesson, and so they started reading that. And so, I'm talking to my 16-year-old about Henry Hazlitt, and I didn't even read Hazlitt until I was 40.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and then For New Liberty, that's the one that really red-pilled me. By
yeah.
Rothbard. That was
Yeah.
the first one that I was like, shit.
Yeah, when he's talking about, my favorite part of that book is when he's talking about the slaves were the rightful owners of the plantation.
Yeah.
I was like, oh yes, I love this
Hell yeah.
book.
Yeah.
So, but no, one of the things in that Fisher wrote about, that he was talking about a student in his class as an example, and his student would be wearing headphones in class, but he'd be like, it doesn't matter, the headphones aren't on. And then one day he wasn't wearing the headphones, he had them off of his ears, like around his neck, I'm assuming, and he had the music turned on really softly, and he asked him, turn off the music, and he's like, oh, I can't even hear it. And he ties this in, like what you were just saying, this dopamine hit, like being tied into the matrix constantly, like connected to this matrix. And do you find, because I've found that since I was introduced, and it wasn't until 2011 that I had a smartphone. I had gone a long time after a lot of other people were interacting on social media and stuff. I had just distanced myself from it because I really just didn't care. It didn't matter to me. And the only reason I got on it was because I'm divorced twice and I have 5 kids. So it's like, okay, my kids are going to be doing this. I might as well be on here to at least have that portion of the relationship. Being a on the road truck driver, I'm gone all the time. At least I can talk to them. And so that was my justification for getting on social media. Now, do you find that I have found that since I have been introduced to social media, it is harder for me to focus on reading and things of that nature. Do you find that to be a struggle? I do a lot more audiobooks nowadays than I do physical books anymore.
So much of the focus of my podcast is to point out abuses of power and how bad things have gotten and the direction in which we're heading as a society. And it can be a real black pill. I've partnered up with Richard Grove to offer my listeners an opportunity to sign up to his Autonomy Course. The Autonomy Course is designed for people looking for solutions, people that want to shape their own future, people that are not willing to be at the behest of large corporations or the United States government or the banking system. The Autonomy Course is designed for those of you who wish to have complete control of the reins of your life, who are looking to be successful, to thrive and not just survive, to provide for your family by utilizing your existing skills and learning how to market and sell those skills in order to be your own boss, or learn new skills in order to leverage that into a new career opportunity. So if there's a job out there you've been trying to get or you've been wishing you could get, but you just don't have the skills for it, the Autonomy Course is the place for you to start, to learn how to land that position, to learn how to market yourself better, to gain confidence, and to be surrounded by a community of like-minded people that will encourage you and help you along the way. So use my affiliate links and go check out the Autonomy Course. It could be right for you.
Yeah, I do, and it's like this is a scary word for people of my generation, but that dopamine fast, just getting off social media, maybe doing some like meditation, like shit like that is really an antidote to just the burnout that people are, plagued with these days. But I do find it hard to read sometimes, and every now and again I'm like, all right, I've taken a couple of breaks off Twitter. Sometimes I'll kind of take soft breaks, like where I'm just not tweeting. I'll kind of look at it every now and again, and I'll keep up with my DMs and stuff. But like I'm just like, all right, I gotta be in a different room from my phone. I just have to put it down and go somewhere else. and read, or like I brought those tinfoil cowboy hats to Childerberg. When I was making those, I was like, all right, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm not gonna listen to any music. I'm not gonna play anything. I'm just gonna sit outside and do that. Another thing you can, I mean, that's just meditation. Like that's really all it is. Or cleaning guns, or doing woodwork, or mowing the lawn, and just not having any stimulus. Just hanging out. And just, I mean, it's really incredible, like, what meditation does. And I really, at this point, like, not only do you notice it helps you just in, like, functional stuff every day, but it's really good for you long term, because, I mean, like, just, it's incredible just sitting there and thinking about doing nothing, or not thinking about it, just doing nothing and clearing your mind as best as you can, like, that actively aids in the neuroplasticity of your brain, which can help fight off, dementia and Alzheimer's and other, brain-related illnesses and diseases. But it's really helpful, and you got to be aware of how harmful, like, dopamine overdose is, and that's what pretty much everyone these days is addicted to. Like, I even know people that aren't on social media, but, like, they just watch YouTube videos all day. They'll watch, like, puppy videos or whatever all day long, or soap operas or whatever. It's the same shit, but I like to think, I have this love-hate relationship with Twitter, because, like, if I wasn't on Twitter, I wouldn't have gotten to meet people like you and some of my closest friends now,
Yeah.
Or Jay and Ace that I do the podcast with, would have never met them. And I recognize, like, for people that are kind of disenfranchised to a certain extent, like, something like that really allows them to get out of their shells and explore, like, different social connections they may not be able to make just, like, at school or at work or whatever. Where people, like, have no idea who Murray Rothbard is, but, like, the average person in our circles, like, yeah, whatever, let's talk about Rothbard. Yeah, I've read all this. I've read all this stuff, and that's cool. You find people that speak your own language, but then you get into that mode where you're trying to get more likes and get more follows, and then it gets kind of insidious, and it messes with your head. You got to take a step back.
Yeah.
So, like, I definitely think that dopamine abuse is very, very dangerous, and I don't think enough people, especially because everyone I talk to is incredibly active on Twitter, like, not enough people really talk about how healthy it is and beneficial it is to just take a step back. Just take a step back and realize what the real world is like, because the real world is not Twitter, Talk to more people at work. Don't alienate yourself from them, and you'll get a better picture of what the average person is thinking. Because no one in our community is very average.
Yeah, no doubt. And that's how I try to keep my podcast, and that's how I try to keep all the discussions, even like when we're getting into something in depth, like what we're talking about right now. It's like, how do we make it, accessible for the layman,
Right.
Like, would I have listened to this 10 years ago or 5 years ago even, is this, and that's kind of the way I look at it, because people are typically, your blue collar guy, he's typically too busy with life to really get into in depth on all these philosophical issues, and they want to, but it's useful information if you can break it down for them, and if you can talk about it in a way that makes it interesting to them, because they only have so much time. You got your average construction worker with a wife and 2 kids at home. Dude only has so much time on his hands. He's not got time to sit down and read 30 hours of Rothbard a week.
Right.
Like, it's just not part of his. And that's not part of his priorities at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But okay, so when it comes to the focus, do you think it's the dopamine that's creating this division in your mind to where it makes it so hard to focus, and you're looking for that dopamine hit? or is there something else going on that's because I've heard like the light of the phone makes it harder to sleep, things like that.
Yeah.
So are there other aspects that are happening that are making it more difficult for people to focus nowadays?
Yeah, well, definitely. Like the light is a big thing because you think about how our bodies work. Like our bodies get sleepy when the sun goes down because that's how we've evolved. So when you're looking at that phone, if you go to bed at like 10 p.m. and you're looking at the phone, you got that light so close to your brain and your eyes. Up till like 9:55, your brain isn't in sleep mode. Like it's going to take a while because your brain still thinks it's daytime because it doesn't know the difference between the types of light, that comes off your phone or the sun or, a lantern or whatever. So that's definitely an aspect. But then I do think it goes back to dopamine because, like, think about why someone would be looking at their phone 5 minutes before bed anyway. It's the same reason for, like, people that are addicted to cigarettes. The people that smoke one as soon as they wake up in the morning, it's a lot harder for them to quit. I mean, it's still possible. It's always possible, but it's a bit more difficult because their brain is so accustomed to having that, during like the capstones of the day, like when they wake up and when they go to bed. It's that routine. But like if someone smokes one or two a day at kind of random intervals, whatever, it's not that bad, and the body will be okay as far as just discomfort for withdrawal. But I do think it goes back to dopamine and the pathways, because when you have that routine, for like, and it's the routine of going to bed when the sun goes down. Those pathways are so primordial in our heads that they're so strong that we can't rewire that. I mean, that is possible, but like it's possible in the sense that you can rewire it. Like if you work a night shift and you go to bed at 5 a.m., when the sun's coming up, you got the blinds closed and your lights are off or whatever, and that's how you kind of reset your clock. But it's not possible to rewire your brain to like get sleepy when the light's on unless something really pathological is going on,
Right.
But I do think it goes back to dopamine because that's what everyone wants, and they want it because it's so quick and easy. Like they're the two happy chemicals. There's dopamine and serotonin. A lack of serotonin is the one that leads to depression. And almost always people get less serotonin because they have an excess of dopamine. So like dopamine is the quick and easy chemical, while serotonin is like serotonin's the one you get from like doing a year of meditating or like a year of weightlifting and eating right and whatever. That's how you get serotonin. You don't get dopamine from eating a salad or whatever. Like you just don't. But it's better for you in the long run. So. Like that's how I've always thought of it. Like dopamine is the high time preference chemical and serotonin is the low time preference chemical. Like you don't even really realize you're getting serotonin when you get it because it's just so low lying, but it's truly what makes you happy. And not in kind of this quick and fleeting way that, people in the modern day are so accustomed to. As far as like social media and nicotine and caffeine and alcohol and whatever, so yeah. Did that answer your question?
So it's so whenever he's talking about the post stage or late stage capitalism creating the depression, what he's actually saying is it's like the death of delayed gratification, and it is the birth or the uplifting of instant gratification. And so the reason that being plugged into the matrix is so important, in his words, is because you're getting that short high, kind of like a heroin addict or a crack addict, and you're always chasing that first high and you never experience the high the same again, right?
Mhm.
So that's one thing you always hear addicts like complain about, is I was always chasing that first high. That first time I did it, the high was so great. I was always chasing that feeling, and I never could match it. So the highs keep getting lower, and so therefore you just keep doing more and more and more, trying to get back to that original feeling.
Right. Yeah, and then the other thing about, like, I mean, delayed gratification is basically outlawed now. Because and he writes about this in the book. As far as and I use the example of a student or a veteran in my outline, because like they have very similar experiences as far as bureaucracy goes. Because like my dad's a vet, I'm a student. So I deal with the university, he deals with the VA, and we have incredibly similar experiences where, person A tells you something, and then person B tells you something, and they're totally different things, and there's no one person you can go to get a final answer from. And
Right.
like this year's paperwork is different from last year's paperwork. But 90% of it's the same, but it's a new form, so you have to redo all the paperwork again.
Right.
And then it's going to change next year. It's still going to be, 90% the same, but you're going to have to do it again. And like we can't keep your social security number on file. It's just we can't, so you have to do all this paperwork all the time, and then the rules are constantly changing, the requirements are constantly changing for what you need to do to keep up your good standing or, keep your benefits or whatever. And so like at any given moment, people don't have any, solid footing off of what they're doing. I mean, they have like no orientation for their actions, and how are you supposed to plan when that's the case? You can't, so and then with the added aspect of social media and just the ease of dopamine that we have, I mean, like people my age have no idea what saving money is. They only know what being in debt is and borrowing money when they need it. Like they have no idea. And part of that is also like the gig economy. Like getting a job these days is not easy. Like I know some very talented people, very hard workers, that just getting a job is just a pain in the ass. And I know that has a hell of a lot to do with where you are, in the country.
Right.
But I mean, like some of the best jobs that people can get are, like working at a gas station or something. And like I don't know how you plan to have a better future if that's the case. I don't know. And so like it seems like, and that helps the elites. If the people can't plan, because then they're always looking. That's the nanny state. They're always looking for, the handout to get them out of the mud. So I think that's very worrisome, and that's a major aspect of like the last third of capitalist realism. And it makes me wish, although I bet he wouldn't have liked Hoppe or Mises, but it makes me wish he read a little bit about time preference in the Austrian tradition, because I think that's a major answer to a lot of these problems, as far as like the inability to plan and the inability to save, or at least the like conditioning not to, plan or save. But I do think that Fisher really hit on something there in the book.
Yeah. I feel like, and I was talking to a buddy of mine that's been on my podcast a few times, who's another truck driver, about this book earlier. We were texting back and forth about it, and yeah, I think he's hit on something. He's diagnosed something that's worthwhile to really look at and to understand. And I think it's a symptom of, massive centralization, where he called it, which I thought was interesting. He called capitalism, like American capitalism, decentralized Stalinism, which I thought was an interesting way to go about it, because there's nothing really decentralized about the economy. It's really they've tied it all together and really made it one monolith that we're all living under. And we have a situation now where I think it's your generation is supposed to be the first generation to not make as much as their parents made, and then you brought up the gig economy a while ago. Then you have this PRO Act that basically is the Democrats trying to outlaw the gig economy and make people more dependent on government and on unions and on the big centralized controlled economy. So I think he made a mistake calling it decentralized Stalinism, but I really think he was onto something with his diagnosis.
Yeah, I think that again, he was on the left, and they have this fear of, it's a fear of capital, like in any sense, and I don't know what their answer to capital is. I don't. Maybe I'm the prototypical capitalist realist, because I just don't understand. But what that becomes is like a fear of the markets, and their issue is, and this goes back to what I was saying earlier about like they're always talking about the feeling of various things and not getting into anything really concrete or like observable. But I think that the issue is they feel that after Reagan and Thatcher, the West took a very laissez-faire turn, which like it didn't. It just didn't. I mean, like,
yeah, he did mention that after 2000 there was massive deregulation, and I was like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like, no, he didn't call it deregulation. He called privatization. And I'm like,
Yeah.
What is he talking about? The government got way more involved in everything after 9/11. Like, what are you talking about?
Right. Well, I think like to them, and this is just a lefty thing, like a sign of deregulation would be like Google Fiber, offering internet. But like, I mean, they feel like the end of every business is Google, but they don't pay attention like the steps that Google took to get where they are, and it's always, lobbying, like always, and bribes and just governmental interference, and they never mention that. And I do have an issue with that too. And listen, I like the book a lot, but I definitely have some issues with it, and it almost always with these lefty stuff, it's when they mention economics in any capacity, because they're almost always wrong, so I cannot say that the book is 100% correct. Like, I don't know if you know this, but before he died, Mark Fisher was working on like his answer to capitalism and to offer a alternative, and he called it acid communism, and it's weird, and it's not like communism how like we think of it, but it's wacky, and he never finished it. And I can't make any excuses for saying that after 2000 there was more privatization, because I mean that's I don't think he was maliciously wrong, but I just think he was not informed, because these philosophers and these people that write theory, like they often overlook the more concrete, so that they can delve deeper into the abstract when like they make mistakes like that, and that doesn't justify it, but it's just a mistake.
I didn't think he was being malicious. I just didn't know what he was talking about.
Right.
I was just kind of like, okay, like I don't really get like what you're going for here. Like, you're not giving me any solid examples, nothing. So I don't really know what you're talking about. More privatization since the 90s than before the 90s, and like I didn't get it. So, but yeah, we're running a little bit over an hour, man, and this is a lot for people to take in. This was I would say that you should read this book if you're interested in capitalist philosophy, and just kind of get an idea of where the left's coming from. And again, there's some decent diagnosis in this book. I got a lot out of it. I just don't know, like you said, I don't know if he would ever offer a really good prescription for what he is diagnosed. But when you look back over the entire book, what is the ultimate like takeaway that liberty seekers could take away from a book like this?
Yeah, I think it's that things may be the way they are, but they don't have to be that way. You know, like I think that, and I know that people in our movement don't necessarily believe that. But like I think that, like I said earlier, the last maybe half of a paragraph is a really good white pill. Do you mind if I read it?
No, go ahead.
Okay. The tiniest event can tear a hole in the gray curtain of reaction, which has marked the horizons of possibility under capitalist realism. From a situation in which nothing can happen, suddenly anything is possible again. And I like that a lot, you know, because I mean, it seems like we will never be able to fight the Bidens and the Clintons and the Bushes and, you know, whoever else is next. But, you know, it seems like every turn, especially during COVID, has just been incredible. Like the amount of like civil disobedience, you know, is really a big white pill. And the amount of people, like, look at what Florida's doing right now. Florida's fucking killing it, man. And I think people are really reacting positively to that. And I think that in how bad things are getting, there's a ray of hope, you know, at the end of it. And I think that with all the different people in our community that are making content and getting out there and meeting people, events like Childerberg, yeah. I think that just strengthening those bonds and getting together and then stepping away from, you know, all the people that we hate, you know, I think that's the step. And, you know, that's why I'm excited about Childerberg, you know, getting bigger, because, like,
yeah,
people go and they realize how cool it is to physically be around people that speak their language. And, you know, yes, that you can just talk to for 3 days and not get bored with one another, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think if you know a lefty that worships Mark Fisher, hand them the essay Anarchism by Voltaire de Cleyre, and make sure that they understand that post-capitalism doesn't necessarily look like communism of any sort. It just looks like people interacting voluntarily.
Yeah.
You know, and that's, I mean, that was one takeaway I took away from this. I was like, if this guy had just taken to heart what Voltaire de Cleyre was writing in her essay Anarchism, he would have seen, yes, there is a post-capitalism. No, it looks nothing like I want it to look like, and nothing like I expect it to look like. This doesn't only go for communists. This goes for you fucking capitalists too. Like, post-capitalism is not going to be anything you expect.
100%.
All right, man. I'm going to stop the recording. Well, all wait. Right. Plug, Cotton. I'm sorry, plug.
No problem, man. On Twitter, Cottonarchist. And then in my bio, you'll see an @Slurp Gang Pod. That's my podcast. We had Tommy on this last episode. And yeah, we just have a good time, and we don't really talk about anything serious. We just kind of hang out and joke around, and it's a really good time.
Yeah.
So yeah, and Childerberg. Check out Childerberg.
Yeah, go to Childerberg and definitely check out Slurp Gang. It's a lot of fun. If you're just looking for something goofy and just some, anarchists just talking shit and bullshitting and not getting down into the nitty gritty of philosophy, like Slurp Gang's the place to go, man. And we just proved that this kid is one of the smartest ones out there. This is our next generation of thinkers right here. So you check out that Slurp Gang to know how sick his sense of humor is.
Thank you, man.
If you're gonna play this game of pick and choose, well, it's a game that was made for you to lose. It doesn't really matter how many times, it's the same old worn out stories, same old lines. They're all pointing dirty fingers in hypocrisy, bragging on their feats of mediocrity again. Never really making any kind of change, but they keep on getting re-elected, and I find that strange. That's why I say fuck them, don't feed them, cause we don't even need them. I never celebrate the tyrants out of taking our freedoms. Yeah, I said fuck them, don't feed them, cause we don't even need them. I never celebrate the tyrants out of taking our freedoms. What's it gonna take for you to see that we're living in a rigged democracy? People stand in line for the thieves that they've been choosing, paying no attention to the rights they keep on losing. But they all gather in the rallies and they chant their names, on goddamn well that it's all gonna be the same. Just 4 more years of war and taxes, 4 more years of them grinding down their axes. And that's why I say fuck them, don't feed them, cause we don't even need them. I never celebrate the tyrants that have taken our freedoms. Yeah, fuck them, don't feed them, cause we don't even need them. I never celebrate the tyrants that have taken our freedoms. Cause we don't even need them, we'll never celebrate the tyrants that have taken our freedom. Fuck them, don't feed them, cause we don't even need them, we'll never celebrate the tyrants that have taken our